The story of Marie Carlson begins in 1974, when a baby girl named Marie was born into a regular family in the Philippines. Worried about her daughter's future, Marie's mother made the tough choice to send her to the United States, believing it would offer Marie better opportunities for success. As a result, Marie was placed with a foster family with a military background, where she befriended a girl named Esther, who was the same age. The two girls became close companions, unaware of a surprising connection between them. What Marie didn't know was that her American foster father was, in fact, her biological father, making Esther her biological sister. As they grew older, the sisters left their parents' home and decided to begin a new chapter in Florida, where they rented a charming apartment near a karaoke club that quickly became their favorite spot. Marie Carlson's life was a bright reflection of her love for the color pink. She had always believed in the importance of living a beautiful life, surrounding herself with flowers and lovely things. However, everything changed when she met Jeff, and she found a deeper, more meaningful understanding of life. Love. They quickly fell in love, got married, and had a daughter named Paris, a name that represented the love and beauty they shared. Despite their happy family life, Jeff remained a mystery. His past and last name were unknown, while Marie remained determined to excel in her career. She had set her sights on joining the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) and was studying criminal law to achieve her goal. However, her journey was not without its challenges. As she progressed in her career, the obstacles grew tougher, and despite her best efforts, Marie ultimately left the police service without realizing her dream. Marie's life took a devastating turn due to a mental health disorder that worsened over time. The trauma of being sexually abused as a child left her with deep emotional scars. As a result, her daily life became increasingly painful and her relationship with her husband. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. Jeff began to suffer. The love they once shared started to fade, and their marriage eventually ended in divorce. The divorce was a difficult but necessary decision, as both Marie and Jeff knew they needed to prioritize their daughter, Paris. They agreed that it would be best for Paris to live with Jeff, allowing her to escape the negativity that had been affecting their home. Despite the challenges, they completed the necessary paperwork amicably and with minimal drama. Throughout the long and difficult divorce process, Marie and Jeff remained dedicated to making decisions that would benefit and care for their daughter, Paris. They remained on good terms and continued to care for each other as friends. Marie was grateful for Jeff's support and made it a priority to spend quality time with Paris, never missing a birthday. Marie had faced many challenges, but she remained determined and refused to surrender. Despite her struggles, she never lost hope. One day, she discovered what had been missing in her life: faith. This newfound faith led her to the Emerald Coast Church, founded by the charismatic pastor James Flanders and his wife Tanya. From the moment she stepped into the church, Marie felt a sense of belonging. The warm and welcoming atmosphere, combined with Pastor James Flanders' sincere and heartfelt sermons, made her feel at home. Marie began the process of recovering and healing from her past experiences, working to make amends and move forward. The Flanders, known for their kindness and generosity, had created a sanctuary where people could find help and support. For Marie, the church became more than just a place of worship. It was a loving community that accepted her with open arms. As she surrounded herself with the church's loving atmosphere, Marie began to heal and grow. With each passing day, Marie felt a sense of freedom and joy that she had never known before. She was no longer the lost and broken person she once was. Instead, she was a strong and vibrant individual, filled with hope and happiness. As she looked out at the sunny Florida landscape, Marie's eyes shone with a newfound radiance, reflecting the beauty and joy that had blossomed in her soul. The church was more than just a building. It was a community of people who genuinely cared for one another. For Marie, this small community became a second family, filled with love, light, and faith. From the outside, the church appeared ordinary, but inside, it felt like a warm and welcoming home. The people gathered there were united by their shared faith, and time seemed to stand still as they came together. Marie, however, was hiding a secret. She was pregnant, and the weight of this secret was crushing her. She felt ashamed and fearful, and only a few close people knew the truth. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. As the news spread through the quiet town, people began to wonder who the father of the child was. The truth was painful. The father was a man Marie had been dating briefly, but he had turned out to be abusive and hurtful. When Marie became pregnant, he disappeared without a word. Left alone and broken, Marie found solace in the church. The Flanders family and the local community showed Marie and her newborn daughter overwhelming kindness and acceptance. They provided a safe and nurturing environment, filling a vital need in Marie's life by becoming like a substitute family. Through their selfless support, Marie was able to find the courage, optimism, and start the healing process from the trauma of her past. Marie had been feeling trapped in her life, and just 3 months after giving birth to her daughter, she made a shocking decision that left everyone stunned. She posted a mysterious message on social media announcing that she was leaving, not just her city, but also her family and friends behind. Marie had been secretly planning her escape, careful not to reveal her intentions to anyone, fearing they would try to talk her out of it. She only hinted at her dreams and expressed her love for her loved ones, making it clear that she was leaving for good. Her departure left many questions unanswered. Where was she going? What path would she take? And would she achieve her dreams? Marie's loved ones were devastated, worried sick about her safety and unsure of what to do next. The uncertainty surrounding her disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was particularly frantic and decided to contact the police to help find her. As the days passed, the worry and fear for Marie's fate only intensified. Marie's sudden disappearance from Fort Walton Beach had barely stopped making headlines when a disturbing revelation emerged. She had left behind her 3-month-old daughter. This news sparked immediate concern from Marie's sister, Esther, who knew her siblings' devotion to her children. "This is out of character for her," Esther said, her voice shaking. "She's always been extremely protective of her kids." Those who knew Marie were shocked by her disappearance. As a mother, she had always been exemplary, particularly with her 7-year-old daughter, Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was especially stunned when he learned that she had stopped visiting Paris, as they had been inseparable. Now, at 37, Marie had vanished without a trace. While she had the right to start anew, the police couldn't ignore the fact that she had left her young child behind. The police analyzed Marie's recent messages and discovered a peculiar aspect: her writing style had changed significantly from before. This led them to suspect that she might be under duress or that the messages were fabricated. An investigation was launched, which soon impacted Marie's personal life. Questions arose about the identity of her daughter Grace's father and the nature of their relationship with Marie. However, even Marie's sister Esther was unable to confirm or deny these suspicions. The police were faced with a complex web of secrets surrounding Marie's disappearance, including the mysterious messages and the uncertainty about Grace's father. In an effort to clarify the situation, the police spoke with Tanya and James Flanders. They revealed that Marie had a history of disappearing temporarily without explanation. The Flanders also shared that Marie had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which could have contributed to her erratic behavior. A few weeks before she vanished, Marie experienced a severe episode of depression. She began taking medication but was forced to stop due to her pregnancy. Feeling extremely unwell, Marie asked the Flanders family to care for her daughter while she rested. After lunch, Marie lay down to rest, and Tanya and Grace went out shopping. James stayed with Marie to keep an eye on her, but he left for a short time to go home. When he returned, he was shocked to find that Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders family immediately launched a search for Marie. They scoured the streets, checking the parking lots of every building, but found no sign of her. Then, James had an idea to check the airport, and to their astonishment, they found Marie's car parked there. Using the spare keys, James drove the car back home. When investigators examined the car, they did not find any suspicious marks or evidence that could lead to Marie's whereabouts. The investigators returned to the airport, hoping to find new leads. Their plan was to review the parking lot camera footage, as the airport is required to keep this information on file. They also hoped to find Marie's ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. However, when they found the ticket, it didn't yield any useful results. The ticket was clean, with no fingerprints or other clues that could aid in the investigation. A search of Marie's car also turned up nothing, and the parking ticket didn't contain any fingerprints. To make matters worse, the cameras in the parking lot weren't working on the day Marie disappeared. This lack of footage was a significant setback for the investigation, leaving the question of whether Marie's disappearance was a tragic accident or a carefully planned escape. As the investigation continued, the police began to suspect that Marie's disappearance might be more sinister than initially thought. They reclassified the case as a murder investigation and shifted their focus to the mysterious father of Marie's child, Grace. The police returned to the church, hoping to find some answers to their questions. Who was Grace's father, and what role did he play in Marie's disappearance? The church, where Marie had found solace, was filled with rumors and speculation. Parishioners whispered about Marie's secret and the plan that had been weighing on her mind. Marie had been struggling with depression and had considered an abortion, but the Flanders family, who were eager to expand their family, had strongly opposed this idea. The Flanders asked Marie to leave her baby with them, while hypocritically offering to help her. Unbeknownst to others, they desperately wanted a second child, despite both being over 40. One parishioner claimed that Marie's baby, Grace, was a reward from above for the Flanders' good deeds. The situation took a turn when Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, arrived on the scene. He was not the father of the child but had information that could solve the mystery. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie's pregnancy and had questioned her about the father. Marie lied, saying she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. However, the investigation that followed revealed the truth. Police spoke with Tanya's friends, who were also church members, and eventually the truth came to light. It turned out that the father of the child was James, and the conception was natural. This meant that James's wife, Tanya, had to silently accept the situation. The revelation caught the investigators' attention, and the Flanders were summoned for questioning once again. Tanya was the only one who showed up for questioning. She confirmed the information and added that she was present when the child was conceived. According to her, everything happened with the mutual consent of all parties involved. After Marie disappeared, disturbing details about her relationship with James and Tanya came to light. It turned out that James was intimately involved with both women, which was not just infidelity but a form of polygamy. At one point, they even celebrated the child's birthday together, taking a photo of James, Tanya, and Marie posing as a happy family. However, this photo was meant to mislead, suggesting that the celebration was only for Tanya and that Marie was not involved. But after questioning Tanya's friends, the investigation uncovered new information that revealed the true nature of their relationship. Although Tanya claimed that Marie was initially happy with the arrangement, it became clear that this was no longer the case at some point. Marie's feelings for her daughter Grace were stirred after she was born, and she became hesitant to give her up to Tanya. According to friends, Marie's reservations fueled her jealousy of Tanya, sparking suspicion that Marie might not want to surrender her child to her rival and plan to steal James away from her. These rumors swiftly elevated Tanya to the top of the suspect list. Following Marie's disappearance, all Tanya's problems would essentially dissolve, granting her the opportunity to raise Grace solo and retain her status as James's beloved wife. However, 2 months had passed since Marie vanished, yet no leads emerged. Investigators diligently attempted to unravel the mystery surrounding Marie's disappearance using available tools, including GPS data. Despite its limitations in February 2011, investigators focused on analyzing phone records and message logs to gather more information. The records revealed that Marie had accompanied James to the airport, but Tanya was absent. This development coincided with the unexpected visit of Jason, a young priest who often represented James and ultimately chose to share information with investigators. Jason shared with others a conversation he had unintentionally overheard after Marie vanished. James expressed his distress and concern, stating that he would have to leave the country due to Marie's disappearance, but he couldn't disclose the details. He only mentioned that something terrible had occurred during Marie's severe depression. Prior to her disappearance, James had stayed with Marie at a clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily took his place. Meanwhile, rumors about polygamy began circulating among the church parishioners, which shocked Jason when he discovered them. Upon James' return from the hospital, Jason decided to discuss the matter with him. Jason asked James about his relationship with Marie. James was honest and admitted to having a romantic relationship with both Marie and his wife. He revealed that he and Marie had a heated argument before her disappearance, which escalated into a physical fight. However, James insisted that Marie was alive and well at the time of her disappearance. Following their conversation, James decided to resign as pastor and soon left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Shortly before their departure, Marie's family had contacted the Flanders family to collect some of Marie's belongings. As a result, investigators obtained Marie's phone, which may have contained crucial information. The investigation into Marie's disappearance was initially hindered because most of the data on James' phone had been deleted. However, investigators were able to recover some fragments, including a video of James promoting precious metals. This finding raised suspicions, particularly since the case took place in February 2011, when digital evidence was easier to erase and surveillance was less widespread. At that time, DNA detection technologies were still in their infancy, making it seem like criminals could easily escape punishment. However, the field of digital forensics was also advancing, and it was this expertise that ultimately helped crack the case. 3 years after Marie vanished, a new program became available that enabled investigators to recover data from phones and computers. This technology allowed them to access messages between Marie and James, which painted a disturbing picture of their relationship. The recovered messages included explicit images, some of which were taken inside a church. Perhaps most damningly, Marie's emails to James revealed her deep desire to leave Fort Walton Beach, fearing the place was cursed. Her messages hinted at her desperation to escape with her child. A chain of unexpected and dramatic events led to the Flanders family's deepest secrets being exposed. Flanders said, "When someone spreads rumors or harms me, I want them to cease to exist." Given James' situation, shrouded in darkness and fear, it's possible he fulfilled this ominous promise. Despite the lack of Marie's body, there was sufficient evidence to issue an arrest warrant for James on charges of second-degree murder. However, the prosecutor faced a significant challenge, convincing the jury of James' guilt without the victim's body. James and his lawyer were in a desperate situation with an uncertain future ahead, so they made a drastic decision as a last resort to try and turn things around. If James revealed Marie's body's location, he would be charged with manslaughter, a crime with a more moderate sentence. After years of anguish, Marie's family agreed to this deal. James's words reveal the disturbing truth. He and Marie had a tumultuous relationship, frequently arguing about her struggles with depression. During one heated argument, Marie physically lashed out at James, and in an attempt to calm her down, he inadvertently knocked her to the ground. Tragically, she lost her life. In the aftermath, James was overcome with guilt and regret. He had unknowingly contributed to Marie's death, and his attempts to revive her were unsuccessful. The investigators eventually discovered Marie's body in the yard of James's house, buried 5 feet underground and wrapped in a blanket. The discovery was a shock to everyone involved, as they had been searching for her for years. The consequences of James's actions were severe. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, claimed to have been unaware of James's crime and was deeply shocked by the news of Marie's death. Marie's body was discovered after a delay, which hindered experts from determining the cause of her death. This delayed discovery may have impacted the direction of the investigation. 5 years later, Marie's family and friends were finally able to lay her to rest and find closure at her funeral. Her sister Esther might have even sung a final song in her honor. August 12, 2019 started out completely normal. Eacher's assistant, Lindsay Burbeck, was on vacation, and she planned to spend the day with her family. She and her daughter Sarah, shopping in Blackburn in the afternoon, and then they agreed to have a nice family evening over a cup of tea and meet her daughter's human boyfriend. They said goodbye, and Lindsay returned home to change and go for her daily walk to the woods. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she left the house and never came back. To delve into this sudden disappearance and try to figure out why this particular day tragedy happened and who was to blame. The events are set in the town of Blackburn in the county of Lancashire in northwest England. The town is located in the southern part of the county on the Blackburn River by the Leeds, Liverpool Canal at the junction of 4 roads and near rich coal mines. Blackburn is renowned for its natural environment and has 4 huge budded parks. Lindsay separated from her husband, Tim Burbeck, in July 2018, but they continued to live together in Upton until March 2019. She then moved to her new home on Burnley Road in Hancote. Lindsay cared for her 2 adult children, Thiven, 20, and Sarah, 17. She worked as an upper-grade teacher's aide at Hill Elementary School in Burnley and loved being surrounded by children. Lindsay was a talented artist who could go the extra mile to create the most amazing props for school productions and plays. On the fateful day of August 12th, she went for a walk in a wooded area known as Capis near her home in the village of Hancote on the outskirts of Accrington and disappeared. At the appointed time, Sarah and her boyfriend Brandon arrived at Lindsay's home, but no one answered the door. Sarah became worried as it was out of character for her mother to forget a scheduled tea party. She tried several times to contact Lindsay, but no one answered the phone. Sarah then sent her a text message that read, "Where are you? We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times. After receiving no response, Sarah sent another text message with a series of question marks, but again received no response. After waiting outside Lindsay's house for an hour, Sarah called her father, Tim Burbeck, to let him know her mom wasn't home and wasn't answering her phone. Tim took a frightened Sarah and Brandon back to his house. Near midnight, Sarah and Tim headed to Lindsay's house again, but with a set of spare keys. To their dismay, she never showed up. Inside, the house seemed quite ordinary and showed no signs of any incident. There was no note of explanation either. At 12:11 a.m. on the night of August 13th, Tim Burbeck contacted police and told the dispatcher, "My ex-wife seems to be missing. We can't find her. It doesn't look like her." Lindsay Burbeck was reported missing. Lindsay's disappearance shook up the community. The people of the small suburb banded together and went out in search of the woman. There were hundreds of people. Men and women, grandparents and people walking dogs, teenagers with bicycles, and even moms with strollers. To most, Lindsay was a stranger. But that didn't matter. After days of desperate searches, social media appeals, and posters, people still gathered at Capis for 2 consecutive days in the hope of finding a vital clue that could solve the mystery of Lindsay Burbeck's disappearance. After several days of fruitless searching, it was clear to everyone that the search was going to be difficult. With each passing day, the chances of finding Lindsay alive dwindled. Detectives classified Lindsay Burbeck as high risk. She had never gone missing before, and her family described the disappearance as very uncharacteristic of her. Nevertheless, the search did not stop for a moment. Locals printed thousands of posters to distribute throughout the neighborhood, while a Facebook group associated with the search quickly grew to 10,000 members. A few hours after the police appeal was posted online, the first posters with Lindsay's face on them could be seen all over the neighborhood. Within a couple of days, there wasn't a lamppost, storefront, or traffic light that didn't have a poster calling for the search for Lindsay. Police launched an investigation into the disappearance from the house as extensive searches were carried out by specialist police officers, dog handlers, Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service, mountain rescue volunteers, and the city's search and rescue team. Drones and helicopters were also deployed to search the area covering Capis and the surrounding open countryside for a considerable distance, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lindsay's disappearance, Lancashire police released CCTV footage showing when she was last seen alive, walking along Burnley Road at 4:10 in the afternoon towards Coppice. She was wearing a purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. A week had passed since her disappearance on August 19th, and with each passing day, there was less and less hope of finding Lindsay Burback alive. Police are still no closer to the whereabouts of the mother of two, but emphasized that there was no evidence that she was the victim of a criminal act, meaning there was still a chance of finding her alive. The search for Lindsay continued. That evening, hundreds of local residents took part in the first mass public search of Coppice after a rallying call was made on social media. Things moved when a local resident's dog ran into a wooded area in Accrington Cemetery. He yelled and called her name several times, but the dog didn't respond. The dog hid its head in the bushes, sniffing and trying to dig for something. The dog's owner walked over to him, stood next to him, and was horrified to find that there was something very soft under his feet. He was frightened and bounced back. Then he smelled a horrible odor and flies were swirling around. A plastic bag and something that looked like a foot were visible from the ground. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay Burback disappeared, her body was found under the most horrific circumstances, buried in a cemetery. The naked body, wrapped in two clear plastic bags mixed with earth and grass, was placed across a shallow grave. The search for Lindsay Burback was considered complete. A murder investigation was officially launched. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter, after conducting an autopsy, determined that death was due to a broken neck. The trauma was inflicted with such force that the entire larynx had crushing injuries. The neck was most likely struck with a foot or knee. An attempt to cut off Lindsay's right leg after death was also determined, possibly with a saw, as tine marks were found. A large laceration was found on the leg, which had been cut down to the bone. The injuries Lindsay suffered were catastrophic. Dr. Carter also reported that due to the poor condition of the body, it was quite difficult to determine the victim's injuries, but she did not rule out any sexual activity on the day of her disappearance, which could not be ascertained due to the level of decomposition of the body. Prior to the discovery of Lindsay's body, members of the public and police had searched the same area for several days without investigation. No one was yet aware of the significance of the tank. Volunteers who searched the cemetery at 9 p.m., August 20th, also found the same dumpster with a dark stain on the outside and thought it might be blood. After taking pictures of the dumpster, they called the police. 2 police officers arrived on the scene to inspect it and found a brown mark that they thought was dirt. The police said the dumpster looked brand new and there was no evidence at the time to link it to Lindsay's disappearance. Therefore, it was left in place. There were other important clues found in the cemetery that were not immediately accepted. For example, local resident Christine Alderson discovered a bloody cloth on the grass at the cemetery on August 18th, while she and her daughter were walking their dogs. She said the blood on the cloth was fresh and red, but thought it might have belonged to a homeless man who frequented the area. Another woman who walks dogs, Judith Bibby, reported seeing red clothing hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cargill Hill Trail that was probably Lindsay's jacket. She also heard a voice, presumably a child's, but heard no struggle, yelling, or screaming. On August 25th, investigators revisited the crime scene and found a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave that had several traces of blood. The evidence was taken to forensic testing, and it came back positive. The gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside surfaces, and Lindsay's DNA was found on the outside surface of the left glove. A pair of her Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the sole, were also found in a blue plastic bag discarded in the cemetery. Examination of other evidence revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in some kind of plastic sheeting, and between the body and the sheeting was found foliage and grass that was not in the cemetery grounds. This led investigators to believe that the body had been moved from another location. That's when detectives remembered a blue trash can that had repeatedly caught the attention of volunteers. Police officers studying the CCTV footage soon made a startling young guy carrying a trash can down the street, possibly with Lindsay's body, became a sensation. The video was shown on the news with a plea for help identifying the man, and it worked. The boy was identified by shocked teachers and parents. The teen surrendered to police the same day. His name was withheld until sentencing due to his age. He was only 16 years old at the time of the crime. The boy in the videotape turned out to be local resident Rocky Marciano Price. Rocky Marciano Price lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Accrington. It had been the Price family home for about 3 decades. The young lad had an impressive array of mental health abnormalities. Rocky had suffered from autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity since childhood. His low IQ created additional learning and communication challenges. He attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week and was described by teachers as a very quiet and non-speaking student. In 2015, a psychologist assessed Price as having a limited understanding of his own emotions and his own emotional well-being. He had pronounced impairments in understanding the connections between events and emotions. Another 2016 report described Price as unresponsive to strangers and in constant need of supervision and care. Timothy Bradley, who taught at the school for 18 months, said they were always looking for ways to involve him in education, but Price preferred practical things to academic subjects. Price hardly ever engaged in conversation even when it came to a topic that interested him. Teachers described Rocky Price as quite strong physically and tough for his age. He went to the gym regularly, liked to tend to the chickens on the family farm, and loved watching movies and playing Xbox. The guy lived in his own world and wasn't always aware of his actions. So what drove him to attack Lindsay Bubeck? Nothing at all. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time when Rocky Price was hunting lonely women. He was looking for a woman to kill, and he didn't care who it was. This was a completely random murder at the hands of a stranger. On August 12, 2020, exactly 1 year after the crime, Price finally stood trial. Rocky Marciano Price was unanimously found guilty by a jury after an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation. Appearing via video link from Her Majesty's Prison Wetherby, Price 17 did not react in any way when the judge read out the verdict. There was also no reaction from his parents in court. He pleaded guilty to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, but claimed he played no part in her death. Rocky Price claimed he was approached by a male stranger and asked to assist in the burial of the woman for a fee. In a prepared statement, he admitted moving the garbage can and burying the body, but said he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, a search of his home in Accrington revealed plastic bags that were identical to those at Lindsay's grave. A tracksuit and other clothing was also analyzed and matched the one he was wearing on surveillance cameras on August 12, 1617. Defense attorney Mark Fenholz told jurors that Price did a horrible and heinous act by burying the woman's body in the cemetery, but he was not her killer. Despite the abundance of evidence against him, Rocky Price pleaded not guilty to the crime, but admitted to moving Lindsay's body. After 2 days of questioning, Price, through his attorney, prepared a statement to explain his movements between Cop Pace, where police believe Lindsay was killed, and the cemetery where her body was found. But the prosecutor affirmatively stated that Rocky Price acted completely alone. The motive for the random attack on the 47-year-old mother of 2 was never revealed, as the perpetrator did not even know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will only be released when the parole board decides he is not a danger. The judge said the attack was swift and brutal. There was no doubt the defendant sprung with the intent to kill a woman who was walking by. Just minutes before Lindsay's incident, Zoe Braithwaite had managed to get away from a hooded teenager with her hands in her pockets, walking alone on a parallel path. Her sixth sense kicked in, and the woman was instantly wary. Zoe was confused by the guy's appearance. He looked out of place for a walk in the woods for this time of year. She quickened her step and then ran away. That probably saved the woman. If it hadn't been her, it could have been someone else. And it was Lindsay. This was a premeditated attack. After missing one woman, he didn't back off his plan to attack another lone woman. His actions after the crime clearly show that he had the ability to plan and reason. His teachers told the court that he was much better at practical tasks than academic subjects. He used this ability to hide his body. Rocky Price was found to have made 2 return trips to Capus on the evening of August 12th. The first incident occurred at 6:55 p.m. when he was seen on CCTV cameras carrying a black rucksack. Possibly in it, he was carrying a found saw to dismember Lindsay's body. The next incident occurred at 8:28 p.m. when dog walker Anthony Dewhurst was seen pulling out an already empty garbage can. This is the same spot where his grandfather, who bears his name, and other family members are buried. Without panic or excitement, young Rocky Price, acting alone, set in motion a plan to dispose of Lindsay's body by placing it in a blue garbage can like a piece of trash, and then burying it in a shallow grave in Accrington Cemetery wrapped in 2 plastic bags. He set in motion a plan to dispose of Lindsay's body by first hiding her in a blue wheelie garbage can and then dragging her to the cemetery. Finding a quiet and secluded spot near the railroad line, he spent over an hour burying her body before leaving a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The murder of a stranger in broad daylight, for which there is no rational explanation, is particularly horrifying to all right-thinking members of society. The random nature of the attack suggests that the accused poses a very real danger to members of the public. The stalking of another woman before he killed Lindsay Bebeck demonstrates that his crime was not caused by a sudden loss of control. 24 hours after he was found guilty of the crime, publication restrictions were finally lifted by a judge, allowing his name and picture to be made public for the first time. Rocky Marciano Price's identity was kept secret during the first and second trial. The jury was told many important details about Price, but they could not be fully disclosed because of his young age. The judge rescinded the disclosure of the restrictions after the jury unanimously found Price guilty of the crime. The defendant's mental illness cannot in any way excuse or even explain his actions. After all, it is quite obvious that he realized that it was terribly wrong to kill, but did it anyway. Although fortunately, such crimes are rare, they instill fear in society. However, the main question in this case remains unanswered. Why did the young guy needed to kill a strange woman, and for what? Only Rocky Price knows the answer, but he didn't answer it. Perhaps if it wasn't Lindsay Bebeck, it could have been someone else. Lindsay's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. More than 200 mourners gathered at the church as police stopped traffic on Manchester Road, while Lindsay's coffin with her body covered in flowers was carried into the church. Dozens of flowers from friends and family, and from strangers whose hearts were touched by Lindsay's story, were left at the scene. Sarah described her mom as a very optimistic and positive woman. Lindsay was making plans for the future. She was planning a trip to Glasgow with her friend, Sharon. She dreamed of finding love on the Match.com dating site. Lindsay Bebeck planned a long and happy life for herself and looked forward to the future with optimism. But all those dreams were interrupted one sunny summer day. Lindsay Bebeck's family and the detectives who investigated the crime welcomed the jury's unanimous verdict, but said no court verdict could ever bring Lindsay back or spare her family and loved ones the grief of loss. In front of the courthouse after the verdict was announced, members of the defendant's family wore T-shirts that read, "Wrongfully convicted, set this boy free." The back of the T-shirts read, "The killer is still at large." Maybe Price is an aspiring maniac. He just wanted to take a man's life, to feel what it's like, to watch someone die and mutilate them. Most likely in any form, it's an absolute neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by problems with social interaction, motor, and behavioral stereotypes. In translation, the word autism means a person who has gone into himself or a person within himself. Autism is still an understudied developmental disorder that can occur due to genetic or hereditary abnormalities. The exact cause is not fully understood, but in our story, the punishment most likely fits the crime. In 2013, Jessica Heringa, a 25-year-old woman, disappeared under circumstances from her workplace. The search for her kidnapper spanned several years, during which numerous other women were affected. When the authorities finally apprehended the culprit by chance, they uncovered deeply disturbing details about him. Jessica Heringa was born on July 16, 1987, and resided in Norton Shores, Michigan. She grew up in a modest family with a sister. At 22, Jessica became a mother to a son named Zine, fathered by her long-term partner Dakota Quayle Dyer. They were still together in 2013, living in a leased home. At the age of 25, Jessica worked at an Exxon gas station in Norton Shores, located near Lake Michigan. Known for her warm and friendly nature as a manager, she often received praise from customers. To support her cherished 3-year-old son, she frequently took on extra hours. Jessica's diary highlighted her ambitions to learn and advance. She aspired to pursue college studies in accounting, but financial constraints hindered this goal. Dakota was unable to fully support their family, leading to frequent disputes and turmoil in their relationship. The couple was engaged, yet their marriage faced repeated delays due to various factors. On the evening of April 26, 2013, Jessica Heringa was carrying out her regular duties at the Exxon gas station. Her day began with a visit to a nearby store around 3 p.m., followed by a drive to her workplace. She arrived at the gas station around 4:35 p.m., parked her car and started her night shift, which was supposed to end at 11:30 p.m. Jessica was the sole employee on duty that night. At 11:14 p.m., a customer called emergency services, reporting his experience at the Exxon station. He had entered the store to pay for his gas in cash, but found it unattended. He informed the dispatcher, "I'm not sure what's going on, but there's no one at the station. The door is open and unlocked. Lights are still on, but there's no one to take my payment. There are just my car and another vehicle outside. Why isn't anyone here? It looks very odd." The police reached the Exxon gas station within 10 minutes of the 911 call. During their inspection of the premises, both inside and outside, they found no evidence of a struggle. Everything seemed orderly. Jessica's coat was in the back room, along with her purse containing $400, car and house keys. A solitary drop of blood, later identified as Jessica's, was discovered near the storage area's back door. Additionally, a cap from a Walther P22 semi-automatic pistol's laser sight and 2 batteries, likely for a watch, were found on the floor. The gas station's cash register remained undisturbed with all the money intact. The last recorded transaction was at 10:52 p.m. for a lighter. The facility lacked interior surveillance cameras. Positioned next to the cash register was Jessica's pack of cigarettes, suggesting she had briefly left her station with the intention of returning soon. Her locked car was parked outside, but Jessica was nowhere to be seen. She had inexplicably disappeared. Upon discovering the station unattended, police reached out to the gas station's owner, informing them of the situation. The owner subsequently contacted another manager living close by, requesting her to secure the premises. Additionally, the police notified Jessica's family of her disappearance. Her parents sought clues to her whereabouts and called her friends. One friend recalled being at the gas station between 8 and 9 p.m. that day, noting that all appeared normal then. Shortly after, a fellow employee arrived to lock up the station. This colleague recounted that around 11 p.m., she and her boyfriend had driven by the station on a motorcycle. They spotted a silver Chrysler Town and Country minivan parked near the rear service door with its back door open. Suspecting Jessica might be involved in theft from the station, they paused to observe further developments. The manager observed a young man with disheveled wavy hair near the minivan, dressed in an orange sweatshirt. She saw him repeatedly open and close the vehicle's rear door before he finally drove off. Police reviewing surveillance footage from surrounding buildings located a video showing a silver Chrysler passing by Exxon gas station at 11:02 p.m. A store employee nearby also spoke to the police, mentioning that he had seen the man in the minivan conversing with Jessica Christian. The employee initially thought the stranger was merely flirting with Jessica, given her attractiveness. He noted Jessica standing outside, while the man questioned why she wasn't inside. Both Christian and Jessica's colleague, who had spotted the man by the minivan, contributed to creating a composite sketch of the unidentified individual. He was depicted as a light-complexioned young male with dark wavy hair, a stocky build, and approximately 1.82 meter in height. The sketch was released 3 days following Jessica's disappearance. Despite numerous calls received by police in response, no significant leads emerged from the information provided. The prevalence of the silver Chrysler minivan in the United States posed a considerable obstacle in the investigation. In Michigan alone, there were approximately 15,000 vehicles of this kind registered. Identifying the specific driver of the minivan linked to Jessica Hinger's disappearance became a daunting challenge, given the vast number of identical models. Initially, Jessica's boyfriend Dakota Quayle D was a suspect in her disappearance. He acknowledged their frequent arguments, but denied ever physically harming her. Dakota actively cooperated with the investigation, informing police that he was at home with their 3-year-old son on the night Jessica vanished. Without access to a car, he couldn't have traveled to her workplace, and his phone records, once verified by detectives, confirmed his presence at home that evening. This led to his exclusion from the suspect list. The investigation revealed that Jessica had numerous admirers due to her amiable and outgoing personality, which sometimes led to misunderstandings. One such admirer was Jess Ammerman, a 37-year-old married plumber. He visited Jessica at the gas station around 9:30 p.m. on the day she disappeared and confessed his love and willingness to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rebuffed his advances. Jess then left the station and called his wife. They spoke for about 50 minutes before he returned home. Following his interrogation, a polygraph test, and an interview with his wife, Jess Ammerman was also eliminated as a suspect. Rob Fallett, the brother of the Exxon gas station's manager, subsequently emerged as another individual involved in this case, though context-wise specifics about Rob's involvement were not provided. Identified as the next suspect, he mentioned visiting the gas station around 9 p.m. on the day Jessica disappeared. Upon greeting her, he noticed she seemed downcast. Asking about her mood, Jessica confided in having family troubles. Rob suggested she could stay with him, but she declined. After a short while at the station and making a purchase, Rob left for a night fishing trip at the lake. Detectives checked Rob's phone records for that evening, which corroborated his account of leaving the gas station for fishing. Consequently, Rob Fallett was eliminated from the suspect list. Search and rescue operations for Jessica Heringa were launched using helicopters, expertly trained canines, and extensive searches of residential and commercial properties, woods, and Lake Michigan. Despite these exhaustive efforts, no leads were found, leading to an impasse in the case. Nearly a year later, in February 2014, a similar event occurred in Michigan. A small blonde, bespectacled woman was assaulted by a man while returning home late at night. She was kidnapped, taken to his apartment, and attacked. Despite threats to her life, she was released after several hours. The perpetrator was identified as 42-year-old Brad Allen Mason. Mason was swiftly located but resisted arrest by brandishing a fake firearm at police officers, resulting in his fatal shooting. Mason had a history of criminal activity, including a 2004 kidnapping conviction and a 2011 arrest for indecent exposure. In 2014, he resided in a dormitory opposite the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. However, investigators found no evidence linking Mason to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years after Jessica Heringer's disappearance, in 2016, another incident involving a young woman occurred late at night. Returning from a party at a friend's house, she became disoriented on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan approached her asking if she was okay and offering her a ride. She refused, but requested to use his phone instead. The man consented, but only if she entered the minivan. Once inside, he locked the door and revealed his phone battery was dead, then brandished a gun, instructing her to stay silent. These cases highlight ongoing challenges faced by law enforcement in solving abduction instances, despite rigorous investigative efforts and community cooperation. He then began driving, feeling sick and nauseated. The woman requested him to lower the window. Seizing the opportunity, she leaped out of the moving vehicle through the window and fled to a nearby house. The man sped away. The victim immediately contacted the police and described kidnapper. Through surveillance footage, the police managed to trace the license plate of the silver Chrysler Town and Country. They identified the driver as 46-year-old Jeffrey Willis. Jeffrey Willis, a factory laborer, led a secluded, modest life and had no prior legal issues. When located in his minivan, police searched and found a Walther P22 semi-automatic pistol. The The gun was traced back to a colleague of Jeff, who had reported her laser-sighted gun stolen some time ago. Willis was arrested and detained. A search of his residence uncovered a box filled with various BDSM paraphernalia, including handcuffs, chains, ropes, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet matching a Walther P22. The box also contained insulin syringes with an unidentified liquid, sedatives, Viagra, lubricant, disposable gloves, and a diagram of a woman's anatomy with marked injection sites. On his computer were numerous videos depicting appalling kidnapping scenes with young women as victims. A hidden hard drive in a ventilation duct contained footage Willis had recorded of his female neighbors swimming without their knowledge. A folder titled Victims on the computer held two subfolders, one named for the missing Jessica Heringa and another for a murdered woman named Rebecca. Rebecca Blech, age 36, was tragically murdered on June 29, 2014, roughly a year after Jessica Heringa vanished in an area just 20 minutes from where Jessica worked at the Exxon gas station. Rebecca went out for an evening run, but never made it back home. She was found by neighbors lying on the road with her clothing disheveled, initially leading to the belief that she was struck by a car, although unconscious. Rebecca still had a pulse when discovered. Emergency services were called, but she succumbed to her injuries before they could save her. Autopsy reports revealed she died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of her death, the perpetrator remained at large. However, 2 years after Jeffrey Willis's arrest, new evidence linked Rebecca's murder to a pistol found in Willis's minivan. Willis denied any involvement, but prosecutors theorized that he had attempted to abduct Rebecca and bring her to his home. When Rebecca resisted, Willis reportedly shot her and fled. Forensic analysis later discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove recovered from Willis's residence. Jeffrey Willis was convicted of Rebecca Blech's murder and received a life sentence. While serving his sentence, he faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica Heringa. Despite consistently denying any involvement in Jessica's disappearance, phone records showed that on the night she vanished, he was present at the Exxon gas station where she was last seen. Subsequently, he traveled to his deceased grandfather's house, which is roughly 13 minutes from the station. Upon arriving at his grandfather's residence, police encountered a heavily secured front door. Forced entry revealed an assortment of cleaning products, powders, and bleaches in the basement. The manufacturing dates on these items aligned with early 2013, matching the time frame of Jessica's disappearance. Colleagues recalled that Jeffrey Willis was notably absent on April 27, 2013, the day following Jessica Heringa's disappearance. When he returned to work a few days later, he had conspicuous deep scratches on his face and hands, raising further suspicions among those who knew him. A woman who visited the gas station on April 25th, the day before Jessica's disappearance, later contacted police. She arrived late in the evening and expressed concern about being there alone at such an hour to Jessica herself. Jessica nodded in acknowledgement, appearing anxious and somewhat scared. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station reassured the visitor by saying, "Don't worry, she has customers who look after her." He left the premises. The concerned visitor, still worried about Jessica's safety, stayed in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and headed home. Tragically, Jessica disappeared the following day in 2016. The witness from the gas station positively identified Jeffrey Willis, recalling seeing him there. Investigators learned that Willis had frequented the Exxon gas station, interacting with Jessica Heringa on at least 15 occasions. Concurrently, 48-year-old Kevin Bloom, Willis's cousin and a prison guard, was taken into custody. Kevin's inconsistent statements during interrogation eventually led to a confession. He disclosed information about Rebecca Blech's death that hadn't been publicly known. Kevin also confessed to assisting Jeffrey in concealing Jessica's body. He described how on April 27th, the day after Jessica's abduction, Jeffrey invited him over for a party at his house. Upon arriving at his late grandfather's residence, Kevin saw Jessica for the first time, lying on the floor bound and lifeless. The cousins wrapped her body in a sheet, transported it in a car to a forest where Jeffrey had pre-dug a grave, and buried her. They then returned home. When Kevin Bloom led the police to the forest to identify the burial site of Jessica Heringa's body, he spent a considerable amount of time wandering through the area. Despite his efforts, he was unable to pinpoint the precise location where they had buried the body. The trial of Jeffrey Willis commenced despite Jessica Heringa's body not being found either alive or deceased. The prosecution presented substantial evidence to charge Willis with her kidnapping and murder. Their case posited that Willis had been stalking Jessica for an extended period. On the night of April 26, 1933, he allegedly parked his vehicle near the service entrance of the gas station. Entering the premises, he is said to have struck Jessica on the head with his gun. During this assault, it's reported that the cover of the gun's laser sight fell off, and Jessica's blood was spilled on the floor. Willis then purportedly dragged Jessica out through the service exit and placed her in the back seat of his car. He transported her to his late grandfather's house where he committed his most horrific acts. Forensic computer analysis revealed that Jeffrey Willis stored photographs and news articles about the search for Jessica on his computer. Following the investigation's progress, it was discovered Willis used a password displayed on the screen consisting of Jessica's initials and the date April 27, 2013, presumed to be the day she died. Willis consistently denied his guilt, insisting he was at home on the night of her kidnapping. His lawyers argued that there was no direct evidence linking him to the case. No DNA belonging to Jessica was found in Willis's house or car. The defense team suggested that her disappearance might be linked to illegal drug trafficking since Dakota had mentioned Jessica developed a serious substance abuse problem. Despite these arguments, Jeffrey Willis was convicted of murdering Jessica Heringa and received a life sentence without parole. Throughout the trial, he displayed neither remorse nor empathy. His cousin, Kevin Bloom, was found guilty of assisting in disposing of Jessica's body. Kevin received a sentence of 2 years in prison and 5 years probation. Suspension from his role in the prison system was yet another blow to Jeffrey Willis. Years after his conviction, the narrative around him took a startling twist. He became a suspect in an older unresolved case. On October 17, 1996, in Fruitport, Michigan, Angela Thorbug, a young woman, was found dead. Her remained at large. Ed Willis, who graduated from the same high school as Angela in 1988, found himself linked to her 1996 murder. In that year, 28-year-old Willis worked as a janitor at his alma mater. Concerns were raised when the principal noticed his excessive time spent in the computer lab during work hours. A check on his computer activities was initiated by the principal. Although the findings remain undisclosed, Willis was asked to resign immediately following the review. The investigation into Angela's murder continues to be shrouded in secrecy. A decade has passed since Jessica Heringa's disappearance, and her remains are still undiscovered. This tragedy sparked a legal battle over the custody of her son, Zahn, between Jessica's sister and Dakota, her partner. Ultimately, Jessica's biological family is raising Zahn. In addition to custody disputes, Jessica's parents have been key advocates for legislative changes following their daughter's disappearance. Their efforts led to the enactment of a law mandating gas stations operating at night to install surveillance cameras. The goal is to prevent similar incidents in the future. The case of Alan Wade. High school sweethearts James Reggie Sooner and Carol Alford hailed from Charleston, South Carolina. They grew up together, same school, same grade, knowing each other since childhood. Over time, their friendship evolved into something deeper. By 1959, at 15 years old, they were dating. Friends often remarked on how harmonious and beautiful James and Carol seemed together. They captured these moments in photos, young and happy, with dreams of a long and joyful life ahead. It was their first deep connection. The pair became almost inseparable, both in school and out. They seriously thought about marriage once they turned 18, a decision supported by their parents. But life had other plans. In 1962, just after graduating high school, James was drafted into military service. He and Carol decided to delay their wedding until his return and promised to exchange letters regularly. Time moved on and separation became lengthy. By mid-60s, James found himself deployed to Vietnam, a hot spot, and all contact was lost thereafter. Carol had no word if her beloved was even alive. Carol faced significant challenges in her life, starting when he stopped writing to her. She chose to further her education while simultaneously securing employment at the Charleston Air Force Base. Eventually, Carol married, but this first marriage ended quickly without any children. In 1975, she entered into a second marriage with Richard Alford, and in 1977, they had a daughter named Rhonda. Unfortunately, the second marriage also proved unsuccessful due to Richard's excessive drinking and physical abuse. By the mid-1980s, Carol could no longer endure the ongoing abuse. She took her daughter and filed for divorce. However, Richard continued to harass and pursue her relentlessly. In 1987, his behavior reached a critical point. Richard purchased a handgun, consumed a large amount of alcohol, and went to confront Carol. On that fateful day, Richard rang Carol's doorbell. She unsuspectingly opened the door while Rhonda was in the room behind her. Despite his daughter's presence, Richard drew his gun and shot Carol multiple times in front of Rhonda. He then left the scene, drove to a deserted area, and committed suicide by shooting himself. Carol was fortunate to survive due to neighbors hearing the gunshots and Rhonda's desperate cries for help. They promptly called for an ambulance and alerted the police. Carol was in critical condition after losing significant blood. She underwent numerous complex surgeries and blood transfusions over several days before beginning her recovery. Although she gradually regained strength, she became permanently blind in her right eye and disabled for life. Toward the late 1990s, Carol's health deteriorated seriously once more. She experienced severe weight loss along with persistent pain and weakness, which prompted a thorough medical examination at the hospital. Despite enduring these substantial physical and emotional hardships throughout her life, Carol's resilience shone through as she navigated each challenge thrown her way. In 1987, Carol received a distressing diagnosis of liver cancer. During her treatment, she was inadvertently infected with the hepatitis C virus, which went undetected and untreated. The virus silently damaged her liver over the years, ultimately leading to cancer. However, due to appropriate treatment and supportive therapy, Carol's condition was stabilized. She was required to take her prescribed medications daily for the rest of her life and undergo regular medical checkups to make necessary adjustments to her treatment plan. Carol faced additional challenges after losing her job at the Air Force Base due to severe gunshot wounds. With the added burden of cancer, she was no longer able to perform physically demanding tasks or remain on her feet for extended periods. Consequently, she took a position as a call center operator for a cable TV company in Charleston, her hometown. On the other hand, James experienced his own set of hardships. Unfortunately, he survived and eventually returned home years later. By that time, he had lost contact with Carol. She had moved residences, married, and believed that James had perished in the conflict. Although James later married, severe injuries from the war led to diabetes and several chronic conditions, which prevented him from becoming a father. His marriage ended after a few years, leaving him living alone since then. He found employment as a laborer on the local railroad, but expected no further pleasant surprises from life. In fall 2000, while Carol was performing her duties at the call center, answering phones and providing customer advice, she encountered another caller whose voice sounded unnervingly familiar. This voice elicited an emotional response within her that she could not ignore. Carol immediately recognized her first high school love, but she was hesitant to act on it because she believed James was dead. She answered all the customers' questions and then suddenly turned to him, saying his full name. Silence hung in the air for a moment. The man timidly asked how she knew his name. Carol began to cry and responded that she was the girl he had dated in high school, the girl he once wanted to marry. For the next few, they both cried into the phone, unable to find words. They soon discovered that they still lived in their hometown and agreed to meet the next evening. Meeting again after 38 years, according to Rhonda's recollection, her mother came home from work that day, looking excited like a schoolgirl and talking non-stop about James. The next day, Carol prepared diligently for the date, trying on dresses, doing her hair and makeup. She realized that she was no longer the young beauty James remembered, but wanted to look her best and win back his heart. Their reunion was exciting. They hadn't seen each other in 38 years. They talked endlessly about everything, the highlights and sorrows of their lives, failed marriages, work issues, and health problems. They reminisced about their happy times together. Their old feelings reignited, and James and Carol were eager to make up for lost time. They began seeing each other daily and decided just a couple of weeks later to live together. 5 months later, they married, and Carol moved into her new husband's home in Riverland Terrace neighborhood. Family life brought its own set of joys and challenges. The couple first resided in their native Charleston, South Carolina. In love and happy, they engaged in everyday life activities and took care of each other, especially since both were aging with health concerns. Next door lived the Cole family, a longtime acquaintance of James's. Stephen Cole had also served in Vietnam, where he was severely wounded and now used a wheelchair. His wife Natalie seemed often absent due to work commitments and preferred socializing with friends over spending time at home. In a bar somewhere, their daughter Tiffany would typically hang around on the street with nothing to do and money for even small pocket expenses. When James and Carol first started living together, Tiffany was still in high school. Good-natured Carol immediately felt a connection with the neighbor girl. She genuinely felt sorry for Tiffany, who seemed unwanted by her own mother. Over 5 years, Carol did everything possible to support Tiffany. Carol invited her to family lunches and dinners, where delicious food was served, periodically bought clothes for the girl, and even provided small amounts of money for minor expenses. Carol treated Tiffany like she was her own daughter, surrounding her with care and attention. In February 2004, the Sumners decided to sell their Chevrolet Lumina minivan. Tiffany expressed interest in buying it through installments since she had no money, but needed the car desperately. The couple decided to sell it to her at a very low price and divided the payment into manageable amounts stretched over a whole year. Early in February 2005, the Sumners decided to relocate to Florida due to health issues that had significantly worsened for both spouses. Doctors advised them to move south near the ocean for better health conditions. By then both were retired, so they chose to make this significant life change. Carol and James sold their spacious home in Charleston and bought property in Jacksonville, the largest city in Florida, where they also purchased a new Lincoln Town car. The couple was extremely happy and settled into their new place while making plans for their future life together. Every day, Carol called her adult daughter Rhonda. She shared everything about what was going on in her life, thoughts and plans included. So when communication ceased, Rhonda was both surprised and deeply concerned. In June 2005, Rhonda became concerned when her mother failed to call her as usual and didn't answer her calls either. Initially, she pushed away negative thoughts and hoped everything was fine with her mom and stepdad, that she thought they might get in touch soon. However, the following day brought no change in the Rhonda called both her mother's and James's cell phones every half hour, but they were now unreachable, and voicemail messages went unanswered. On the third day, Rhonda decided it was time to take action. She chose to drive to another state to personally check if her mother and stepfather were all right. She started early in the morning for a 5-hour drive to reach the Summers' home. Upon arrival, the first thing she noticed was that their car was missing, which seemed unusual. Approaching the front door, she found it slightly open. Inside the house was eerily quiet, despite a light being on in one of the rooms while sunlight streamed outside. Rhonda called out loudly for her mother and James, but heard nothing in response. Entering the kitchen next, she saw a table set for two with food that appeared untouched for at least 3 days. It looked like they were about to have dinner, but abruptly left it unfinished. The house itself was in disarray. Things were scattered around randomly, and some doors and cupboards were open, as if someone had frantically searched through them. Rhonda's concern grew when she spotted crucial medications on a bedside table in their bedroom. Her mother's cancer pills, taken 3 times daily, and James' insulin, administered hourly, remained there untouched along with completely dead phones. Given these observations, medications left behind, and no cell phone usage, it became clear that her mother and stepfather couldn't have gone far or been away for long without these essentials. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Rhonda immediately contacted the police to report their disappearance under what seemed like strange circumstances. The couple's vehicle was promptly included on the wanted list. All bank cards belonging to Carol and James were blocked the same day. The initial days of the search yielded no significant results. It was impossible to locate either the some known as themselves or any witnesses. However, on June 12th, several events transpired simultaneously, enabling the police to pick up the trail of the criminals. Firstly, a man phoned one of the banks, identified himself as Mr. James Sooner, and complained about his card being blocked, making it impossible for him to withdraw cash. Upon verifying the card information, the bank employee immediately suspected something amiss. The employee suggested that Mr. Sooner personally visit the nearest bank branch to resolve the issue, but the man abruptly hung up. A few minutes later, from the same number, yet directed at another bank, a woman identifying herself as Mrs. Carol Sooner called and reported a similar problem, with her card being blocked. When she was asked to visit the bank in person, she categorically refused, citing health reasons and emphasizing her immediate need for access to her funds. Naturally, this request was denied. The information regarding these calls and recordings of them were immediately handed over to law enforcement. The same day at the station, these recordings were played for Rhonda, who confidently stated that neither voice belonged to her mother or stepfather. This was evident from the outset as both individuals were in their 60s while the voices sounded much younger. Police promptly hypothesized that these imposters were directly connected to the disappearance of the Sumners. They suspected that either these individuals had kidnapped Carol and James and were holding them somewhere against their will, or had possibly killed them after coercing information about their bank accounts and cards. A few days later, the missing couple's car was discovered, abandoned on a deserted road in a wooded area. There were no traces of blood or signs of struggle in the cabin. Experts found hair and sweat marks in the trunk, which belonged to both spouses. It became evident that the owners had been taken away in the trunk of their own car, and prospects of finding them alive were grim. Upon examining the couple's bank transactions, it was revealed that money had been withdrawn from their cards several times after they ceased contacting their daughter. Reviewing the ATM surveillance footage showed that a young man, who couldn't be identified immediately, made the withdrawals. Additionally, a request was made to trace all calls from the number used by the imposters to contact the bank. The SIM card itself was purchased with prepaid time shortly before the disappearance of the couple. Attempts to establish the buyer's identity failed. However, it was discovered that on June 6th, a call was made from this number to a car rental company. It turned out that a guest at one of the hotels rented a Mazda RX-8 under the name Tiffany Cole. This same car was subsequently driven by an unidentified young man who withdrew money from ATMs using cards belonging to the missing individuals. He withdrew $1,000 from one card and nearly $3,000 from another. Thanks to built-in location trackers in rental cars, investigators determined that this Mazda RX-8 had parked at a hotel in Charleston. A CAPTCHA team was promptly dispatched and forcefully entered the room where these individuals were staying. The room was strewn with packages and receipts from various stores, including clothes, gadgets, video games, cosmetics, perfumes, and expensive alcohol. Inside were three individuals: 23-year-old Tiffany Cole, her 24-year-old boyfriend Michael Jackson, and 19-year-old Alan Lindell Wade. The young men appeared surprised and confused as police placed handcuffs on their wrists. All three individuals were taken to the police station and placed in separate rooms for questioning. Initially, they pretended not to understand the accusations against them or simply remained silent. A search of their room uncovered several items belonging to the Sumners, including their bank cards, a laptop, some of Carol's jewelry, James's expensive coin collection, keys to their Lincoln Town car, and pawn shop receipts in the name of Cole. It was discovered that part of the stolen jewelry had been pawned by Tiffany and the money spent with friends. After several hours of interrogation, and upon being presented with irrefutable evidence found in the hotel room, Tiffany was the first to speak. She sobbed as she revealed that she and her friends had robbed the elderly couple, but insisted they did nothing further to them. They then fled and started spending other people's money. Tiffany also admitted that there was another accomplice, a 19-year-old named Bruce Kent Nixon, who was paid $300 for his help. They never saw him again after that. Indeed, Bruce had agreed to participate promise payment. Afterward, he spent all the money on illegal substances. Finding him wasn't difficult, as he lived in Charleston and had not attempted to flee or hide. He was arrested at his parents' house. A careless phrase led Bruce to realize how serious consequences could be for his involvement. Consequently, he agreed to cooperate with the authorities to avoid facing the death penalty. What he revealed was horrifying. It all started in May 2005 when Tiffany went to deliver a payment for a car bought 6 months prior from the Sumners. She often visited them personally because hospitable Carol and James invited her to stay for a night or a few days, offered delicious food, and even gave gifts if she brought friends along. There was always space for guests in the house and at their table. This time, Tiffany showed up with her new boyfriend and were warmly invited to dinner. Since it was late, the couple ended up staying overnight at the Sumners' home. During the meal, the Sumners discussed how they had settled into their new place. Carol inadvertently mentioned that they had nearly $100,000 left after selling their house in Charleston, implying they could comfortably enjoy their retirement without any financial worries. With this revelation, Carol unwittingly sealed her and her husband's fate. Tiffany and Michael exchanged looks. That night, while still at the couple's house, they began plotting how to obtain that substantial amount of money. In the morning, Tiffany and Michael bid farewell and returned to South Carolina. Over the next 2 weeks, they found accomplices, assigned roles and responsibilities, and began executing their plan. On June 6th, Tiffany rented an inconspicuous car while Bruce and Alan stole 4 shovels from an unspecified location. Together, they drove to a secluded spot in the suburbs of Jacksonville and started digging a deep hole intended as the grave for the Sumners couple. On July 8th, Tiffany purchased rope and duct tape from a hardware store and handed these materials over to her accomplices. That evening, Bruce and Alan arrived at the prospective victim's home under the pretense of needing assistance and asked if they could make a phone call from inside. Despite finding them strange, Carol decided to let them in, thinking they genuinely needed help. Once inside, Bruce and Alan immediately attacked Carol and her husband when he responded to her screams. They bound the couple's hands and feet with duct tape, blindfolded them, and demanded information about any money or valuables in the house. Under severe threats of torture and death, the Sumners provided details of their bank accounts and PIN codes for their cards in hopes of being spared. However, once this information was obtained by the intruders, 2 additional accomplices entered the house. They helped drag Carol and her husband into their backyard before stuffing them into the trunk of their family car. Alan drove their Lincoln with Bruce seated beside him, while Tiffany and Michael followed close behind in a rented Mazda RX-8 as part of their sinister plan. While on their way, they encountered a police patrol that might have tried to stop the car with the couple in the trunk. The second car was supposed to divert attention by speeding up or blatantly breaking rules. However, no one appeared in their path, so both cars reached the destination safely. In the trunk, James managed to free his arm. He removed the bandage and duct tape from his face, and also from his wife's face to prevent suffocation. There wasn't much more they could do. Their surprise, bewilderment, and shock were immense when the trunk lid opened, and among their captors were Tiffany and her boyfriend, who had recently visited them. The captives were led several dozen meters through the woods to a prepared grave. They were then simply pushed into it. The couple pleaded desperately for their lives, but the young criminals proceeded otherwise. They killed the couple in a brutal manner by burying them alive. According to Bruce, it took about an hour for them to cover the bound elderly people with earth while they cried, confessed their love for each other, and said goodbye. An examination later showed that the spouses died of suffocation. Pieces of soil in which they were buried were found in their mouths, respiratory tracts, and even stomachs. After completing this gruesome act, the outlaws abandoned the Lincoln in the woods and then returned to town in a rented car. They went to the Sumer house where they took valuable items and then returned to South Carolina to start spending their loot. However, after 2 days, all stolen cards were blocked. For days later, all participants in the crime were taken into custody. Bruce Nixon was the only one who fully admitted his guilt from the beginning and agreed to cooperate with investigators, hoping for leniency. He revealed where the spouses were buried and detailed everything that happened on that awful night. Tiffany claimed that her boyfriend, Michael, had lost his mind and initiated the crime. When he heard about the substantial amount of money retained by the summoners after the sale of the house, her lawyer argued that the girl was an accomplice and not directly involved in the murder herself. Jackson and Lindell opted to stay silent, but the collected evidence compellingly. The jury didn't think Tiffany Call's innocence, since she participated in creating the criminal plan, rented a car, and devised a diversionary tactic if they were chased by police. She even helped dig a grave for the spouses. Furthermore, she pawned stolen items and joyfully spent money, as evidenced by numerous photos of her in purchased clothes and in a limousine rented to celebrate their illicit success. As a result, Bruce Nixon was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Jackson, Tiffany, and Lindell received the death penalty. Despite filing multiple appeals and grievances, all were denied, leaving the sentence unchanged. However, in 2023, 18 years after their heinous crime, that very same death sentence had yet to be carried out. The case of Jassi and Mithu. In 1994, in the month of December in the city of Jagraon, in the Ludhiana district of Punjab, a boy named Sukandesh Singh Sidhu, his nickname was Mithu, after playing a kabaddi match, was standing at a rickshaw stand waiting for a rickshaw to go back to his village. He had some friends with him who had come to support him during the match and to boost his morale. During that time in Punjab, there were some rickshaws like the ones you're seeing on your screen now. Kabaddi is a sport played between two teams in Punjab, where each player demonstrates their strength and smartness. Since Mithu was the #1 kabaddi player in his village, he was quite attractive and powerful. The rickshaw hadn't arrived at the stand yet, so Mithu and his friends were joking around. Suddenly, they noticed 3 women walking towards the rickshaw stand from the opposite road. As these 3 women approached, Mithu and his friends noticed that 2 of them were older, while the third one accompanying them was a very beautiful young girl. When the rickshaw arrived at the stand, all passengers got in, and the beautiful girl sat on the back seat, while Mithu stood behind the rickshaw. During this journey, Mithu noticed that the girl kept looking at him repeatedly, and his friends also noticed this. However, Mithu couldn't talk to the girl, and as soon as she arrived in her village, she got off the rickshaw shore with her family. Once again, she looked towards Mithu, and for the first time, their eyes met. Besides, she smiled when she looked at Mithu, and in response, Mithu also smiled. Then both of them went their separate ways. When Mithu started doing some other work after reaching home, he heard a girl's voice screaming, "Please help, I need help." As soon as Mithu stepped out of the house, he saw that it was the same girl he had seen in the morning in the rickshaw and smiled at while she was leaving. After that, Mithu went to the girl who had come on a scooter with her friend from her home. Here, Mithu first greeted the girl with a hi and then tried to start the scooter, but deliberately didn't start it. Then, Mithu asked the girl her name and also told her his name. Actually, the girl's name was Jaswinder Kaur, but her nickname was Jassi. After that, Mithu said to the girl, "I want to talk to you." Hearing this, Jassi got confused because she didn't understand Mithu's words. So her friend who came with her translated Mithu's words into English for Jassi. Then, the girl also said something in English, but Mithu didn't understand English. So Jassi's friend became a translate, and then both went to their respective homes. But from that day on, these two meet regularly. Gradually, Mithu also realizes that Jassi's maternal grandparents' house is the wealthiest home in her neighboring village. Besides, Jassi's maternal home and Mithu's small 2-room house were on the border of 2 villages, meaning Mithu's house was right behind Jassi's maternal grandparents' house. And Mithu knows this fact. After this idea, Jassi and Mithu eloped on March 15, 1999, avoiding the scrutiny of their families, and got married in a Gurdwara, which is a place of worship for Sikhs. After the marriage, Jassi returns home as if everything is normal, and no one suspects anything. However, the relationship that Jassi's family had been considering for her breaks down for some reason. After staying in Punjab for 2 months and marrying Mithu, Jassi leaves for Canada with her family. But before leaving, she promises Mithu that she will come back soon. After going to Canada, Jassi and Mithu start talking to each other on the phone again, and by now, Mithu's house also had a telephone line installed. Months passed by in this way, but at the beginning of February, some relatives of Jassi who were in India come to know about Mithu and Jassi's marriage, and they immediately inform Jassi's parents in Canada. After this, their love story takes a sharp turn. From this point, Mithu's parents start pressuring him, while on the other hand, Jassi's mother and uncle begin pressuring her to break the marriage. However, neither Mithu agrees to it, nor does Jassi consent to breaking the marriage. Although Mithu is tempted by money and Jassi is tempted by expensive things, cars, and the lure of a luxurious lifestyle, neither of them is willing to break the marriage. One day, Jassi's mother brought documents for Jassi to sign so that Mithu could come to Canada. Jassi signed them all, unaware that the documents claimed Mithu had forced her into marriage and assaulted her. Later, Jassi came to Canada with her family. In reality, after Jassi signs this document, her family members send it to the India Punjab police. And based on it, an FIR First Information Report is registered against Mithu for abduction, forced marriage, illegal weapons possession, etc., and he is also arrested. After the arrest, Mithu is brutally beaten in jail and stays there for several months. Meanwhile, when Jassi fails to receive any response to Mithu's letters and is unable to contact him over the phone, she finally learns from a friend that Mithu had been jailed on charges of abduction, forced marriage, and other offenses. Here, Jassi discovers that her mother, Malat Kaur, had deceived her by obtaining her signature and implicating Mithu, causing significant difficulties for his family and friends. Furthermore, the Punjab police have arrested Mithu's family members from his home and imprisoned them as well. Then, a few days later, Mithu talks to Jassi where he says to her, "If you wanted to divorce, Jassi, you could have just asked me. We got married with your consent, so why did you falsely accuse me?" After this, Jassi tells Mithu the whole story of how her mother and uncle got her to sign on the wrong paper, deceitfully. But now, in Canada, Jassi was kept confined in her own home by her mother and uncle. But then one day, Jassi gets an opportunity and successfully manages to come to India with the help of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Then she comes to India and testifies in court that Mithu, his family, and his friends are all innocent. "I married Mithu of my own free will." After this statement, everyone, including Mithu, is released from jail. Then Jassi stays in India for some time. This time, Jassi tells Mithu that she will never go back to Canada again. It is said that along with the police, Jassi's father and brother also helped her escape from home. Jassi had come to India and started living with her husband, but both of them also knew that Jassi's family members would not remain silent. That's why as soon as Jassi arrives in India, Mithu takes her away from home, and they start living in hiding. Mithu took Jassi to her hometown in June 2000, while they were living at their home. Meanwhile, on June 12th, Mithu's family had organized a party in their village for Mithu and Jassi's wedding. So on June 8th, Jassi tells Mithu that she wants to go shopping. Initially, Mithu refuses because he knew there was still danger, so leaving the house wasn't right. But then, when Jassi sits at home upset, Mithu also feels maybe he did wrong. Jassi left her home in Canada to be with him, and he couldn't even take her shopping. After that, they both leave for the market in the afternoon. It takes them a bit longer to return home. So by the time they get back, it's already evening, and the sun has set. Because of this, Mithu's family starts worrying about both of them. A while later, Mithu's family begins searching for them. However, during the search, they receive devastating news that shakes Mithu's family to the core. They find out that Mithu is in a very serious condition, admitted to the hospital, while there's no trace of Jassi. When Mithu's family members rush to the hospital, they find out that Mithu's condition is extremely serious, and he is unconscious. Jassi is not there. Then, after several hours, when Mithu regains consciousness, he first inquires about Jassi. Only then do they inform Mithu about Jassi. A few days later, when Mithu recovers, he explains the reason behind his condition. Mithu says that after reaching the market, Jassi did a lot of shopping, and then they both also had coffee together. Later, as they started returning home from the market, their scooter stopped on its own 3 or 4 times. Twice, he sought help from a mechanic, and once he encountered his friend on the way. However, when the scooter started for the 3rd time, they noticed that they were being followed by 2 people on another scooter. However, after following the scooter riders for some time, they went ahead. But as soon as Mithu turned towards his village, he saw a car in front of him. At first, he saw from a distance that there was no one near the car. But as soon as he approached the car, suddenly 5 to 6 men came out and stood in front of the scooter. One of them even attacked them, which caused blood to start oozing from Jassi's head. After that, Mithu held Jassi and started fighting back against those thugs. But then, one thug also attacked Mithu's head with a large rod from a nearby road. After that, Mithu became unconscious, and those thugs kept beating Mithu. And finally, thinking he was dead, threw him into the nearby drain. A few hours later, late at night, some laborers passing by noticed Mithu lying there, and they picked him up and took him to the hospital. After learning this story, everyone sets out to find Jassi. This information is also given to the police, and now the police also begin to search for Jassi. After filing cases of assault and abduction against unknown criminals, the next day, on June 9th, Jassi is found, but she was not alive. In fact, Jassi had also been murdered and thrown into a canal, which was 45 kilometers away from her hometown. When Jassi's body is retrieved from there, it is discovered that someone had brutally strangled her to death. Additionally, Jassi's body bore dozens of deep wounds, indicating that she had been tortured cruelly before dying. When Jassi's body is found, the Punjab police also contacts Jassi's family. However, Jassi's mother Malota and uncle Surjit Singh both deny recognizing the deceased as Jassi. But Mithu and his family, along with Jassi's father and brother, confirm that the body is indeed Jassi's. Now the key question was who had inflicted such severe beating on Mithu, and who had brutally murdered Jassi. After Jassi's body was found, the charge of murder was added to the case, and the police embarked on the search for the criminals. During the search, the police managed to apprehend several major criminals in the vicinity based on suspicion. The police was so alert because although Jassi was Mithu's wife, she was actually a Canadian citizen. In the case of Jassi's death, suspicions quickly arose among certain individuals, and the police soon discovered who was involved in Jassi's murder. When the police rigorously interrogated these individuals, some criminals confessed to having committed Jassi's murder themselves and admitted to brutally beating Mithu as well. However, the question remains who instigated all of this. During the investigation, when the names of certain individuals come up, nobody trusts anyone. Anil Kumar, a gangster involved in this incident, implicates Inspector Jenda Singh of the Punjab police, claiming that he had given him a contract to kill Mithu a few days earlier. Now the police immediately start searching for Inspector Jenda Singh and manage to arrest him shortly after. When questioned by the police, Jenda Singh explains that he carried out the murder because he received a phone call from Darren Singh, Jassi's other uncle who resides in Punjab. Darren Singh promised him a group of 3 lakhs to kill Mithu. Now the police ask Anil Kumar why he killed Jassi when he was given the contract to kill Mithu. Upon revealing the truth, Anil Kumar and his accomplice leave everyone astonished. Anil Kumar explains that after beating Mithu, they thought he was dead, so they threw him into the nearby drain. Then, following Darren Singh's orders, they took Jassi to an empty farmhouse. As soon as Jassi regains consciousness upon entering the farmhouse, she begins to search for Mithu. Upon inquiry, the roughs inform her that Mithu is dead. Now he starts talking to Jassi's mother, Malia, who tells him to wait for a moment, and she will tell them what to do next. After this, Jassi's uncle and her mother have a conversation. And afterward, they called the roughs again and instruct them to beat up Jassi and threaten her, besides asking her to testify against Mithu and come back to Canada. Despite being beaten badly by the roughs, Jassi still refuses to return to Canada and testify against Mithu. After this, the roughs once again talk to Jassi's mother and tell her that Jassi is not willing to listen to them. After this, Jassi's mother tells the roughs that if Jassi doesn't listen to anything, they can kill her too. Initially, the Rafts refused to do so because their deal was only to kill Mithu for 3 lakh rupees. But Jassi's uncle, Surjit Singh, says a separate 3 lakh rupees will be given to them for Jassi's murder. After that, the roughs brutally beat Jassi, attacking her body with swords, knives, and pieces of glass. Jassi is tortured badly, and finally, one of the roughs strangles her to death. Jassi dies, and her body is lifted and thrown into a distant canal. Following this revelation, 13 people, including Jassi's maternal uncle, Dharan Singh, who resides in India, are arrested in this murder case. They are charged with abduction and murder, among other offenses. Jassi's mother, Malik Kaur, and her uncle, Surjit Singh, who live in Canada, are also considered prime suspects. Now, since the victim and the accused had relations in Canada as well, the trial of this case begins in both India and Canada. During the trial in India, it is proven that when Jassi refused to leave for Canada without Mithu, Jassi's mother, Malik Kaur, and uncle, Surjit Singh, planned that if Mithu is killed, Jassi will surely come back. After this, Suraj Singh contacts his brother, Dharan Singh, in India and assigns him the task of getting Mithu killed. Afterward, he contacts Inspector Jenda Singh of the Punjab Police and seeks his assistance in this matter. Following this, Inspector Jenda Singh arranges a meeting between Dharan Singh and a contract killer named Anil Varma. Subsequently, Anil, along with his gang, executes this incident. After a lengthy trial on October 21, 2005, the Sangru court sentences 11 out of 12 people as guilty. Among the convicted individuals, Jassi's other maternal uncle, Dharan Singh, Police Inspector Joinder Singh, and contract killer, Anil Varma. However, as time progresses, these individuals challenge the verdict of the lower court in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, where almost all the accused are granted bail one by one. In the end, only Jassi's other maternal uncle, Dharan Singh, Inspector Jender Singh, and contract killer Anil Kumar are deemed guilty and sentenced to imprisonment. However, all the convicted individuals challenged this decision of the High Court in the Supreme Court. Subsequently, proceedings begin here as well. And on April 16, 2015, Dharan Singh is acquitted and discharged. However, the rest of the defendants do not receive relief from here, and their sentence remains upheld. Apart from this, before delving into what happens in the courts of Canada, let's take a step back in the case. Due to being severely injured in the attack, Mithu remains hospitalized for a long time. While staying in the hospital, Jass's final rites are also performed. However, as soon as Mithu recovers and returns home from the hospital, a series of 7 cases are filed against him, one after another. There were some cases of illegal weapon possession with allegations of drug selling against Mithu, and pressure is also built by the police and Jassi's relatives to retract his statement and end the case. However, Mithu doesn't yield to anyone's persuasion and continues with the case. Meanwhile, in February 2004, a woman accused Mithu of rape. Upon these allegations, Mithu is immediately arrested and sentenced to Lana Central Jail. Mithu stays in this jail for the next 4 years. But after 4 years, it is proven in court that the woman who accused Mithu of rape had connections with Jass's maternal family, and she falsely accused Mithu for money. After this revelation, Mithu is released from jail after serving 4 years. However, despite this, there were still some cases pending against Mithu, and he continued to have dealings with the jail during this time. Besides Mithu, his brothers also faced different allegations, and behind these accusations was Jassi's uncle Sharat Singh. When Mithu doesn't fear even fake cases and threats, around 2012, attempts are made to buy him off. In this case, Jassi's family offers Mithu 10 million rupees and a prime location of 14 acres of land to change their statement. However, Mithu remains stead and continues the fight for justice. Malik Kaur and Surjit Singh, the main suspects residing in Canada, were extradited to India for the trial of Jassi's murder case, which began on January 6, 2012 in Canada. The police in Maple Ridge arrested Jassi's mother, Mallard Cow, and her uncle, Surjit Singh, for conspiring against Jassi and arranging her murder. After 2 years, on September 9, 2014, the Supreme Court of British Columbia approves their extradition to India. Both suspects then appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, which stays the lower court's decision and starts a new trial. On September 8, 2017, the Supreme Court of Canada orders Malat Kao and Surjit Singh to be sent back to India to face the charges. After the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada, 3 police officers from Punjab immediately depart for Canada to take the accused into custody. However, in the meantime, the accused once again file a petition for review against the court's decision. As a result, the Punjab police have to return empty-handed. Although the review petition provided temporary relief for a few months, finally, on December 11, 2018, the Supreme Court of Canada rejects the review petition, leading to their definitive extradition to India. After the completion of legal formalities, both accused were repatriated to India by Canadian authorities. The police immediately rushed to the scene of the crime, hoping to save 9-year-old Andrew and his 14-year-old sister, Naomi. An unknown man had committed a ruthless attack on the priest and his family. Leaving no traces behind, the criminal made it one of the detectives' most challenging cases in the detectives' careers. Fortunately, they managed to find witnesses who had seen everything. Their testimonies helped uncover the truth about what had really happened to the Hawkinsmith family. In February 2013, in Danville, Kentucky, 35-year-old priest Michael Hawkinsmith, who had previously worked as a manager at a local pawnshop, had to take full control of the pawnshop due to the former owner's health condition. As a former priest, Michael had always been honest with people. He easily found common ground with others and was always willing to help. When he decided to get married, no one doubted his choice. Angie was his first love, and everyone saw her as a very sweet and kind girl. Michael literally worshipped the ground she walked on. When the couple had children, their relationship became even stronger. Together, they were a very happy family. As the Hawkinsmith family expanded, so did their business. The pawnshop, ABC Gold, games, and more became a successful family venture, attracting regular customers like broker Dan Smith, with whom they often conducted business on Fridays. Life seemed perfect for the Hawkinsmiths until one day in February 2013, when an unknown man decided to disrupt their peaceful existence. 6 minutes after the phone call, police officers arrived at the scene of the crime. When they entered the building, their attention was immediately drawn to a large bloody trail, which led them to Michael Hawkinsmith. Moments later, they found his 38-year-old wife, Angie. And on the other side of the counter, they discovered the third victim of the crime, 60-year-old broker Dan Smith. All 3 victims had gunshot wounds to the head and torso. A few minutes later, officers found Andrew Hawkinsmith and his little sister Naomi hiding in a closet. The officers' accounts indicated the unimaginable horror these young children had endured. Suddenly, the 9-year-old boy and his 14-year-old sister were left orphaned, having lost both parents. Upon examining the crime scene, police found 14 spent .22 caliber shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase that belonged to Dan Smith. The victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the register were left untouched, suggesting that robbery was not the motive for the crime. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the pawnshop, posing a significant obstacle to the investigation. The police had no choice but to rely on finding potential witnesses to the crime. An employee of the nearby Rain Boy Cleaners was able to describe a car that had parked near the building that morning. It was a silver minivan driven by a large man with a thick beard. While one group of investigators searched the surrounding area, another informed the closest relatives about the tragedy that had befallen their loved ones. Michael's parents found it difficult to accept the circumstances that someone in their right mind could wish harm to their children. Nevertheless, they tried to find any positive aspect in the situation, and the fact that their grandchildren had survived could not but rejoice them. Soon, the tragic news reached the daughter of the third victim, Dan Smith. He was involved in buying precious metals and skillfully adapted to the specifics. February 2003. He had visited Lawson's jewelry store in Harrodsburg, located 10 miles northeast of Danville. In the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera positioned on the far wall to capture every visitor entering and exiting the store. They hoped that the recording would help them determine if anyone had been following Dan Smith. Smith entered the store at 8:16 in the morning, and there were no other customers in the building at the time. He was carrying the same briefcase that was later found at the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. After greeting the woman behind the counter with a smile, headed to the back of the store. Sometime later, Dan Smith reappeared on the footage coming out from the back of the store saying something to an elderly woman who had just entered and then immediately leaving. It was a typical day in the life of the jewelry store. The external camera recording showed nothing suspicious. The police were left to helplessly monitor the man who had no idea he would soon be at the center of a tragic event. Meanwhile, 9-year-old Andrew Hawkinsmith was taken to the police station to give his testimony. Andrew described how he had been at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith arrived carrying a bag full of money. While his father and Dan were talking, the stranger entered and immediately demanded the bag. According to the boy, Dan Smith immediately handed over his briefcase, after which the stranger shot him. My father asked him to stop, but he also shot him with a pistol similar to the one I play with, Andrew said. Meanwhile, the mother instructed Andrew to take Naomi to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew took his little sister and hid. It was then that the criminal aimed the gun at Angie. I don't know who he is and why he did it, but it seems to me that the reason was money, the 9-year-old boy concluded. He described the stranger as a very tall man with a blonde beard that looked fake, matching the description provided by a witness from Rainbow Cleaners. To follow all possible leads, the police's next step was to thoroughly examine the business run by the Hawkinsmith family. It turned out that the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop had another owner, Steve Devine. While he usually attended Friday deals with Dan Smith, he was absent on the tragic morning of September 20th. This information raised concerns, making determining his whereabouts a top priority. Steve Devine explained that he had developed an allergy that morning and was forced to cancel all his appointments, a story confirmed by his wife. The alibi and the fact that Steve Devine did not own a silver minivan helped to rule him out as a suspect. Replacement had not yet installed a replacement. 48-year-old Keith, like his deceased friend, Michael Hawkinsmith, was a priest. Pastor Keith sold the pawn shop when he was diagnosed with brain cancer, but he remained the owner of another similar establishment, Gold Rush Buyers in Pulaski County, neighboring Danville's Boyle County. Michael's family revealed that he prayed for his friend every evening, hoping for his recovery. Their friendship, which began when Michael worked at a youth church camp, had lasted for 15 years. The Hawkinsmith family always held Pastor Keith in high regard, and for their son, Andrew, he was like a beloved uncle. With no significant leads, investigators decided to try their luck in finding possible street surveillance systems near the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. They found a camera on the office building of the real estate office Danville Rentals. The surveillance footage captured a silver minivan at 8:45 in the morning, but the image was too blurry to identify the license plate or the make of the vehicle. Once again, the police had to rely on the witness's testimony from Rainbow Cleaners, which described the car as an old model with a distinctive square body bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the car all indicated that the police had found the criminal's vehicle. They continued to search for surveillance systems farther and farther. From the pawn shop. At 8:17 in the morning, the camera at the local Ephraim McDowell Hospital captured the same vehicle. And finally, investigators were able to determine that it was a silver Dodge minivan. Michael and Angela's family organized a candlelight vigil in their memory. Hundreds of compassionate people attended that evening, demonstrating the depth of love for their lost ones. Similarly, like the Hawkinsmith family, Dan Smith's close relatives were outraged that the whims of another had led to the loss of their loved one. Despite their grief, they chose not to let anger overshadow their other emotions and joined funeral proceedings. Meanwhile, the Danville Police Department appealed to the public for any information about the criminal or his vehicle. Immediately after this, on September 24th, the police received a call from Tracy Harold, a pastor in Warren, Michigan. He claimed to be a friend of Kenneth Keith and mentioned that during their last conversation, they touched on the topic of the murder in Danville. And at that moment, Mr. Keith seemed to change. Pastor Kenneth Allen informed his friend that on that particular day, He was driving to Danville for medicine for his wife. He also expressed a sense of guilt for what happened as he had given Michael Hawkinsmith the opportunity to become the owner of his former business. Keith put forward the theory that Dan Smith himself could have been the main target of the attacker. Keith explained that Dan would come to him every Sunday to pawn all his gold, always carrying large sums of cash with him. Keith speculated that someone might have tracked Dan's route and ultimately targeted him, but there was more to the story. As it turned out, the pastor's relationship with the Hawkinsmith family was not as everyone had believed. These words raised suspicions, leading to Pastor Keith being added to the list of suspects. To verify his alibi, investigators decided to review the surveillance footage from the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where, according to the pastor, he bought medicine for his wife. At 9:24 in the morning, a man entered the pharmacy, indeed Pastor Kenneth Allen Keith, but he looked nothing like the man who had committed the triple attack just minutes earlier. He was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which were distinctive features of the assailant. However, this did not rule out his involvement in the attack. There was a 7-minute gap between Andrew Hawkinsmith's call to the police and the pastor's arrival at the pharmacy. The police decided to check if it was possible to travel from the crime scene to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy in such a short time. They found that the trip took about 5 minutes in total, so it was plausible to commit the murders, quickly get into a car, and reach the pharmacy to establish a solid alibi. The key clue was that Pastor Keith had an unregistered 2008 Dodge minivan, which was silver. However, all the evidence found was circumstantial, and it was not enough for an arrest. So investigators turned to Tracy Harold to participate in a series of fake phone calls aimed at the suspect. Luckily, Tracy agreed. During these calls, Pastor Keith finally revealed his true feelings towards the Hawkinsmith family, and then what everyone had been waiting for happened. Keith began discussing details of the case that had not been made public. Following that, Pastor Kenneth Keith explained that he left Danville and returned to Somerset. He then took his car to the car wash to prepare it for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 in the morning, Keith was seen on camera walking down the hallway to the cashier's counter with a noticeable smile. It seemed clear that he was not involved in the dreadful crime that occurred earlier that morning. The external camera footage covering the parking lot showed Pastor Kenneth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25, matching all the images previously obtained from various surveillance systems in Danville. At that point, they had enough evidence to arrest the suspect. He was offered a polygraph test to prove or alleviate his involvement in the pawnshop crime, but his response was rather unusual. Keith stated that he would not be able to pass the polygraph successfully because during his military service, he was tasked with eliminating 3 individuals. The investigators obtained a warrant to search Kenneth Allen Keith's pawnshop, where they discovered a fake beard and a significant amount of cash. The police could not find any legitimate explanation for how he acquired most of the money. They also found bundles of bills wrapped in a ribbon with the name of the bank that issued them, revealing Dan Smith as their client. Further investigation revealed that the money found in Keith's pawnshop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a dead broker. Additionally, several .22 caliber casings were found in Keith's pawnshop. According to ballistics analysis, they were fired from the same weapon used to shoot the parents of young Andrew and Naomi. Based on all the evidence found, Kenneth Allen Keith was charged with 3 counts of deliberate homicide and first-degree robbery. It turned out that Pastor Keith believed that Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Devine had conspired to get rid of him from the business. Knowing that Dan Smith carried large sums of money, Keith decided to exact his revenge on the day of their planned meeting at the pound shop. Keith aimed to mislead law enforcement into thinking the crime was motivated by robbery. In reality, Michael Hawkinsmith and his partner Steve Devine had no involvement in the imagined conspiracy against Keith. During the investigation, no evidence of discreditable activities by Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Devine was found. On September 20th, the criminal arrived in Danville in his silver Dodge Caravan. He circled the pawn shop for a while until he noticed Dan Smith's car parked nearby. The first victim was the broker himself, followed by Michael and then Angela Hawkinsmith. The pastor then took all the cash from Dan Smith's case and calmly left the crime scene, stopping at the Good Neighbor Pharmacy to be captured on its surveillance cameras and secure an alibi. His decision to go to the car wash was another attempt to remove traces and destroy any evidence that might have been left on his vehicle. In 2017, just before the trial, Kenneth Allen Keith pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Before the trial, investigators obtained medical documents from the Veterans Hospital and discovered that the pastor had never had a brain tumor. How could someone who seemed so spiritually inclined commit such a heinous crime? Furthermore, how was he going to live with the knowledge of what he had done? The case of Maria Ladenburger. Maria Ladenburger, a 19-year-old from Freiburg, sparked widespread outrage in German society and raised serious concerns about the local police and the German government as a whole. Born on December 6, 1996 to Clemens and Friederike Ladenburger, Maria's parents were both lawyers, with her father holding a high-ranking position in the European Union. At the time of her death, Maria was a medical student at the University of Freiburg. In addition to her studies, she volunteered part-time at a local center that provided aid to immigrants. On the night of October 15, 2016, Maria attended a party hosted by the medical faculty, where she socialized with friends until around 2:30 a.m. Since she lived on campus, approximately 3 miles from the university, she decided to ride her bike back to her dorm. Tragically, at 2:37 a.m., Maria was last seen riding her bike towards campus. Several hours later, at 8:20 a.m., a jogger discovered her lifeless body in the River Dreisam, about a mile away from where she was last seen. Despite an immediate call to the police and ambulance, medical professionals were unable to revive her. The incident raised numerous questions about the efficiency of the local authorities and the government's response to similar cases. During the forensic examination, investigators determined that Maria's death was caused by drowning. Additionally, they found evidence that someone had attempted to strangle her with a scarf, which was discovered at the scene. The scarf contained a sample of male DNA believed to belong to the perpetrator. Near the crime scene, police found several black hairs, 7 inches long with bleached ends in the bushes. The hairs had roots, allowing authorities to obtain another sample of male DNA. This sample matched the one found on the scarf used to strangle Maria. Despite this evidence, the police were unable to identify the owner of the DNA samples, as no matching information existed in their databases. On November 8th, the authorities offered a €6,000 reward for information that could help solve the case. Thanks to several individuals, the reward amount was soon increased to €35,000. The police conducted an extensive investigation into Maria's death, questioning over 1,000 people, including those who attended her last party. Additionally, more than 100 individuals voluntarily submitted DNA samples for comparison. However, none of the DNA samples from party attendees matched the DNA evidence found at the crime scene, leaving the police without a DNA match. The public was shocked and alarmed when the details of Maria's death were published in the press. And as a result, residents of Freiburg rushed to buy pepper sprays, fearing for their safety, since the perpetrator was still at large. There was also an increase in reports of women being harassed in the city, with 2 similar incidents occurring in the same area, one just days before Maria's death and another 2 weeks prior. As a consequence, self-defense classes became extremely popular in Freiburg, with many people enrolling in local sports centers to learn how to protect themselves. Meanwhile, to boost security, 25 extra police officers have been deployed to patrol the city streets. Due to the high crime rate, many people are too intimidated to venture out alone at night. The police pursued all potential clues, but the breakthrough in identifying the perpetrator came from the hair and scarf found at the crime scene. With the description of the sought-after individual being a male with long black hair featuring bleached ends, the authorities began scrutinizing footage from numerous city cameras. Upon reviewing the CCTV recordings from the city tram, they spotted a man with a similar hair color and length. The individual in question sported an undercut hairstyle characterized by short hair on the sides and back and longer hair on top. This particular footage was captured on the night of October 16th at 7 a.m., approximately 40 minutes prior to Maria's departure from the party. The suspect boarded a tram near the university and after a 20-minute ride, disembarked at the final stop, which was less than a mile from the location where a jogger subsequently discovered Maria's body. Notably, the suspect had harassed 2 girls on the tram, though they eventually managed to extricate themselves from his unwanted attention. On December 3, 2016, nearly 7 weeks after Maria's death, the police arrested 17-year-old Hussein Cavari as a suspect. Initially, authorities believed him to be an immigrant from Afghanistan. However, during the investigation, it emerged that he was not 17 and not from Afghanistan. Cavari had entered Germany in November 2015 without an ID card, claiming to be from Afghanistan and born in 1999. Cavari said he was 16 when he arrived, but he lacked documents to support or disprove this. Due to his claimed age, Germany granted him asylum as an underage unaccompanied refugee. He was placed with a foster family in a scenic town near the Black Forest, where he attended school, learned German, and received government benefits. It turned out that fabricating his age was a common tactic, which provided advantages not only when applying for asylum, but also in case of committing crimes, as juvenile offenders face less severe punishment. The suspect's age will be revisited later as it's just one aspect of his troubled biography. After the police arrested Hussein Cavari as the prime suspect in the Maria Ladenburger case, his image was published in the media. Although German media outlets blurred his face, TV channels and newspapers in other European countries did not, publishing unobstructed pictures of him. A Greek lawyer, Maria Eleni Nenkop, recognized Cavari after seeing his photos in the media. She had previously defended him in court in the spring of 2013 when he was charged and found guilty of a life-threatening attack on a young student on the Greek island of Corfu. Cavari claimed his father had died many years ago in Afghanistan, but the police discovered his father was actually alive and living in Iran. The court was able to determine Cavari's age more accurately after the prosecutor contacted his father by phone. According to his father, Cavari was born in Iran on January 29, 1984, which made him 32 years old at the time of Maria's death. As a result, he was tried as an adult. During the trial, Cavari stated that a few hours before the attack, he and his friends had consumed a large amount of alcohol and taken prohibited substances. After partying, he took a tram to the area where he later attacked Maria. In her free time, Maria worked part-time at the Immigrant Assistance Center in Freiburg, where she tried to help people in difficult life situations. Ironically, she was killed by one of the people she was trying to help. The crime sparked widespread public outrage and disgust, prompting social media users to post sarcastic thank you messages to Chancellor Angela Merkel, criticizing her liberal policy that allowed over 1 million refugees and immigrants into the country. During the trial, Prosecutor Ertberer emphasized to the 2 jurors and 3 judges that the focus was on the criminal offender, not Germany's refugee policy. Cavari broke down in court as he read a heartfelt apology to the victim's family. He claimed to be haunted by nightmares of Maria's death every day. "I offer my sincerest apologies to Maria's family," he said. "I wish I could turn back time and undo the harm I've caused. I'm deeply remorseful for my actions, and the guilt is consuming me from the inside out. The agony of what I've done is destroying my life piece by piece." Hussein Cavari shared his harrowing journey from Iran to Germany, highlighting struggles in Greece and Slovenia. He spoke candidly about scavenging for food, engaging in illegal activities, and living with a foster family in Germany, where he turned to substances and alcohol. Cavari revealed psychological issues, including nightmares and insomnia, stemming from concerns about his homeland. Cavari recalled killing Maria Ladenburger after a night of heavy drinking and drug use. He harassed girls on a tram, then stole a bike but fell off due to intoxication. That's when he saw Maria, pushed her off the bike, and strangled her with a scarf until she lost consciousness. He was attracted to her beauty and took advantage of her state. He carried her into the water where she drowned. Cavari claimed he was too intoxicated to control his actions, but prosecutors argued his actions were deliberate and premeditated. A psychiatric expert told the court that in their professional opinion, Cavari's display of remorse was not genuine. They testified that Cavari had consistently shown a strong tendency towards violence and warned that there was a high risk of him committing another offense. The expert also stated that Cavari had a fascination with aggressive sexual practices and held hostile views towards women. Furthermore, they noted that Cavari lacked remorse and compassion for the harm and suffering he had caused to others. Maria's parents hired a lawyer to represent them at the trial, opting out of attending due to concerns about emotional statements from victims' families influencing the outcome. They also wanted to avoid media hype and politics. They considered meeting the perpetrator, but decided against it, believing Maria wouldn't want them to, and that it wouldn't achieve anything positive. On September 22, 2018, Judge Catherine Shank found Hussein Cavari guilty. Before sentencing, Cavari was handcuffed and wore a black hooded jumper, showing a lack of empathy that drew applause. He received a life imprisonment sentence, but under German law, he's eligible for early release after 15 years if deemed no longer a threat. However, Judge Schenk emphasized the severity of his guilt, making early release unlikely. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.